Our topic today is using real estate to fight inflation. This world is crazy. Just to see the inflation that we're starting to experience. And when you're heavy in cash, then that's a bad thing. But when you're heavy in assets that are also going up, then it's a great thing. So that's why I'm saying use real estate to fight inflation. Just a little bit about me and why I'm such a huge man. I'm a believer in real estate as an investment, and anybody that I can talk into it, I do, because it's so powerful. So I'll just give you a little bit of background, because here I am teaching a class like I know something. And really what I do is a lot of reading and a lot of talking to people. And I'll tell you a little bit about my experience too. I'm not a tycoon by any means. I have 6 buildings, which works out to 12 doors. I have 3 single families, 2 duplexes, a 4 family, and a commercial office building that has a apartment above it, which I own or occupy. That's where my office is, which that's the easiest way to start any of this investment. Some of us are past that point, and that's perfectly fine. It's not the only way. But whenever I can get the ear of a young person who maybe isn't married yet or doesn't have kids or whatever, and convince them to start with a duplex where your tenants are making your payment, my word, that's an easy way to start. But that's not where I started. But that is how I got my commercial space. Is I just owner occupy, because it's the same concept. Because I'm owner occupying it, so to speak, with my office, I was able to get different loan terms that aren't available to everybody. It made it easier for me to get started. So anytime you can do that for your own personal use, banks look more kindly on it. They think you're less of a default risk if you are personally using it, and that's probably true. So anytime you can do that, you should do that. So that's just, I guess I started before I became a realtor. Investment real estate is part of why I became a realtor. I started, I was a CPA back in the day, and it was a great career, and it gave me a really good background in numbers. And I had someone recommend to me the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which I would in turn recommend to you. It is Robert Kiyosaki, and he has a whole series of books. Rich Dad, Poor Dad is number 1 there. The one that came first, I should say. And it is, it really got my mind going on the idea of passive income, because real estate, for as amazing and awesome as it is, there are some components of it that maybe would be saleable when we retire. But by and large, our product is our time. And once we maybe kind of have a client list, but we don't own them. So to be able to invest and put some away for the future is really important. So the idea of passive income and how do we build that up, I think is really, really important for us as realtors. Really anybody working a 9-to-5 kind of job. If you don't want to work a 9-to-5 kind of job for the rest of your life, you have to build up things where you're using, this is a Robert Kiyosaki-ism, where he says other people's time and other people's money. And when you're leveraging that, then you have a business, and that might be something that would generate money without your effort. So real estate is a really, really easy business that would be passive income to get into. And I saw that immediately. Having said that, I think the word passive is a little bit of a misnomer, because it doesn't mean that you do this and you never look at it again. It's just not maybe as active as a 9-to-5 job. So what I did is I bought, my husband and I had taken the Dave Ramsey course. So we were debt-free except for the house. And so as I had extra money, we were able to purchase a duplex. That's where we started. And actually for the down payment, I made use of a home equity line of credit on my house. We'll get more into where do you get money from. I'm just giving you a little bit of background. So that was, I mean, almost 20 years ago. I've been in real estate for 17. So yeah, that was probably, I'd call it 19 years ago that I bought my first duplex, and it worked out great. But not without its missteps. So that's, if there's anything that I want you to learn from this webinar, it's just start and don't worry about doing it perfectly, because it's a long-term investment, there's a lot of wiggle room for not doing it perfectly. And you're still gonna build wealth. It is the greatest investment in the whole world, in my opinion. So I want to get into that. This is why I believe in it so strongly. It is probably one of the number one things that you can do to build wealth quickly. So I am a proponent of it, somebody who's maybe a little bit later in life that needs to make up some time. But heck, the same concept works for a young person, and you can just do it that much faster starting then. So why wait? This is why it's the power of leverage. You all know what leverage is. You have a big rock and a little rock, and you use a stick. And because of where the stick is, you can move that big rock, but you wouldn't have been able to move on your own, because it makes that more powerful. Well, loans kind of do the same thing for us, which of course is a double-edged sword. When the market went down, we're losing money on the bank's money, but when the market goes up, we make money on the bank's money. And that's something that I do want to address just quickly. I know there's a lot of what's going on in this market. Of course there is. And we're all a little shell-shocked, at least old people like me that were in the market when it was 2007, 8, 9, and it did go down. But I know, except for that time, real estate has never gone down in value. I think that was a unique time, in that the downturn was caused by real estate. This inflation that we're experiencing is not caused by real estate. It's caused by the lack of real estate. There's just not enough housing for everyone that needs it. It's heartbreaking, really, if you start thinking about it. The last couple tenants that I placed in my place, we're living in hotels because they couldn't find a place to rent. Like, that's heartbreaking, right? So I don't think that we're gonna see values go down. I think what we're gonna find, especially there's some upward pressure on rates, that kind of thing. I don't think it's gonna make real estate go down, but it might not be going up at 15% per year anymore. I think it's gonna taper down to 10, 5 over the next few years. Having said that, it doesn't take much for us to make huge returns on our investment. For example, this is just a simple example, but I think it'll get the point across. If you buy some real estate for $100,000, for easy math, and you put down 20%, that's a common amount. We'll get into financing here in a minute, but that's a common amount that you're going to need to put down, is 20%, right? So $20,000 on a $100,000 investment. And that other 80,000 came from the bank. Who's making that payment? Well, it's a rental property, so the tenant is making the payment. Otherwise, obviously, the returns would be lessened by the payment that you need to make to a certain degree. But even so, this math works on your personal residence as well. You got to live somewhere, so you might as well make some money on the bank's money. So you're 100,000, 20,000 down, and then we experience appreciation of 5%. I think that's a conservative number for what we're experiencing right now. Went up 5%. That's $5,000. So you made in 1 year $5,000 on your 20,000 investment. That's 25% in 1 year, and that's conservative. What if it went up like it did last year, 15%? Then you just made $15,000 on your 20,000. That's pretty darn good. And I've seen, like I said, I don't own $1 million. I'm not a tycoon, but I have 6 properties that all experience that. I'm doing all right. I'll just say it like that. And I'm not a tycoon. So just think if I had 100 hashtag goals. The other thing that's pretty darn amazing about real estate is that you can lock in your interest rate. They're pretty low right now. I know they're going up, but even so, historically, they're pretty low. So if you didn't refinance already, or you didn't buy anything already, it's not too late. It really is not too. I know when we bought our first house, I want to say it was like at 9%, something like that. But once you get that good rate and you refinance into it, if you started it a little bit higher, you're fixed. That is not something that's going up and down. That is fantastic. So I like to say that your first year tends to be your worst year, because that's when things are, when you haven't experienced the appreciation, and you know, property taxes are as high as a percent as they're going to be, but these things all are pretty fixed for us. So the longer that you hold it, the more profitable your real estate becomes. I heard a quote one time. I don't know if it's true, but it's something that resonates in my head. And I keep thinking about it. I think it was the Queen of England bought a bunch of real estate during the war to fund her country and give them some stability. But it worked out well for her too, because now she owns a bunch of real estate. And her quote was is buy and never sell. The longer you can hold it, the more profitable it becomes for you. Again, property taxes are capped. We all, as realtors, know how this works. When you purchase a property on caps, and your taxable value and your assessed value are the same, but then as time goes on, and let's say it goes up 15%, for example, like it did last year, then it's going to go up. That assessed value is going to go up 15, but the taxable only goes up the rate of inflation. It does not take long where there's a pretty good disparity between that. So you are not paying your property taxes based on the market value anymore. And that's fantastic. Now, having said that, your property taxes are, as you know, 18 mils higher than it would be for an owner occupied. And I think that's sad, because you kind of have to pass that along to your tenants. But that's a pretty great little feature. Again, the longer you can hold, the more profitable it becomes for you. The other reason that real estate, I think, is an amazing way to invest is that you control it. If I bought Apple stock, I am not in charge of how creative they are and what's their next product that comes out. And is Tim Cook going to be as good as Steve Jobs, and what's going on at the board of directors? I don't control any of that. Which may, you know, for good or for bad. You do control which stock you buy, certainly. But what we control in real estate is everything. We control which property are we going to buy, what repairs are we going to do, which tenants are we going to allow. And as you become more and more knowledgeable, you get better at that, and your profits increase. So again, making my point of, don't wait till you know everything, because some of this you just learn as you go, and that is perfectly fine. Bunch of ways to build wealth in real estate. And this conversation will kind of factor into when you're starting to, when you say, okay, Julie, I'm sold, let's start investing in real estate. I'm going to ask you what your goals are. And then we're going to pick a property that meets those goals. Based on either is your goal, now you hope you can do all 3 of these things, but you do the best if you're aiming for one. Now, paying down the mortgage kind of happens whatever way you do it, but cash flow, obviously, when your rents exceed what your expenses are, then yay, you have cash. Now, what I've been doing is not touching that cash. I let it accumulate, and then when I have some, I go buy another one. Use my wealth to build more wealth, and so you pick up steam. They say your first million's the hardest, which that's the reason. You pick up steam and it gets easier and easier as you're able to reinvest. The other way is appreciation. And the reason I say pick one that you're aiming for, and maybe you can have different goals for different properties. I definitely do that. It's going to be different types of properties that you're choosing based on if you want this cash flow or if you want appreciation. Because there's two different ways to make money, you're going to be competing to buy that property against people with different goals. So like appreciation is going to be more in areas that are in high demand. Single family homes tend to appreciate better than multifamily homes because the buyer pool is much larger. It can be a bunch of people who are buying it to live in it versus multifamily homes are going to be just other investors. So because there's more demand for that product, your appreciation is higher. But your cash flow on a single family isn't as good. When your single family property is vacant, the rent income that you're making is zero. For example, you have one roof that covers one family instead of one roof that covers 4 families. So your cash flow just isn't going to be quite as good, but your appreciation is better. So which one is more important to you? And some of that might be your stage of life, if you're wanting to pull money out or not. But that's just something to keep in the back of your mind as you're trying to decide, okay, what kind of property? Now, for me, I have this and probably most of you on here too, that you're real estate agents. And if you're investing for yourself, the other thing that I am thinking about is that I love home ownership. Like when I get a renter, in my mind, I'm thinking, how do I get you out of this trap of renting? I really want you to be a homeowner. Like I'm never worried that I'm going to get another tenant. I'm not trying to hold them in as tenants, even if they're great ones. I really want everyone to be a homeowner. I think that's so good for them. So I like to buy single family houses because then there are people who I know already have the ability to make that monthly payment because their payment's going to be higher than mine as a renter, obviously, because their property taxes are higher if for no other reason. So I know they have the ability to make that monthly. It's usually either just they're trying to do some credit repair or they don't have the down payment. So if I can do anything to help them get into a position to be homeowners, then I really want to do that. Just the philosophy of it. But then also I'm a realtor. If I can sell them that house, then that is what we call a win-win. So that's maybe that's the subscript for us realtors. Another way to build cash flow is sell them a house. Let's do that. So hopefully I have you at least a little bit convinced. Yeah, real estate sounds amazing. There's all these ways to make money. It's passive. You control it. Leverage the bank's money. Yeah. Who doesn't want to build wealth? What is stopping you? I did a little Facebook poll. As far as what is stopping you? What are things? And it was obviously nothing scientific about that. I was just trying to kind of get some reactions and to see if it was what my gut feel was. To a certain degree, it was. One was just they don't feel like they know enough about it. Lack of information, I guess I'd use as the umbrella term there. They are just kind of nervous about, I don't know what I don't know. How do you start? How much money do I need? Because the lending's different. Maybe your clients have bought a house for themselves, but they know that it's going to be different getting a loan for an investment property, and they just don't know how much money do I need. We're going to talk about that in a second. How does that impact my tax situation? It does make it more complicated, but there's some good tools for that as well. Some good advantages. But sometimes there's disadvantages too, so that's good to be aware of, is how does it affect your taxes? I'm kind of having a disadvantage here, if I'm just being real. I do want to be real about the downsides. I don't want to sugarcoat this because it is not for everybody. I think it's for a lot of people, but it's not for everybody. I know for me this past year, I had to replace 3 different roofs, and that's expensive, but it's also a capital expenditure. So that means the IRS requires that I take that expense over the next 27 and a half years. Not this year, which is when I spent the money. So depreciation is both a pro and a con for tax purposes. So for the next 27 and a half years, it'll be a pro because I am deducting things that I did not spend this year. And that's true when you buy something, you depreciate it over the time that you own it, even though that's not necessarily cash expenditure. So that's what is stopping some people, is just the confusion over how does this impact me for tax purposes. Also, tenant screening and management. That's daunting because that's where we hear the horror stories, right? If you ever talk to somebody who says, yeah, I tried that once, but then this, and this happened, it's because of the management side of things. Everybody's worried about, what if the furnace goes out the middle of the night and I have to deal with that? What if their plumbing backs up? What if, there's a lot of what ifs. What if I just get a bad tenant that refuses to leave and they trash the place? And that's legitimate. And I guess here's what I would say to that. 1 is you get better at it. And 2 is a bad tenant is not the end of the world. If you kind of go into it knowing that you'll get some bad ones every now and again, and that's fine. There's laws that protect us landlords as well. Like if they just stop paying, then we evict them. Eviction isn't fun. It's probably my least favorite thing to do, but that mechanism is there for us, and we just take possession back and we put somebody else in. That costs a little bit of money, but it is not the end of the world. It would not be a reason to not make use of this tool, at least for me. The other thing that maybe should be stopping you, and this is a whole nother discussion. A lot of these things I'm bringing up could be like seminars unto themselves, but you want to do this in order. It does require some financial stability. So what I mean by in order, this is, a lot of you know that I do the Brian Buffini coaching systems, and Brian talks a lot about going from survival to stability, to success to significance. And if you are at survival, you're barely making it week to week, buying rental property is probably not the best move for you. Definitely own your own house first. That is where you start. If you haven't invested in your own home, don't invest in rental property unless you're getting a duplex. That's the place to start, something you're going to live in and then rent out the other side. But maybe you end up like me and you're going to have to put a roof on. You have to have the money to do that. The buck stops with you. What if the furnace goes out and you need a new one? I had that happen too. You don't plan on that. You didn't necessarily budget $5,000 new furnace or whatever they are. But you have to provide your tenants with heat. That's the deal. They give us rent. We give them a safe place to live. So that requires some financial stability. If you don't have any savings, this might not be the thing for you yet. I think it's a great goal. So don't ever be daunted by that, but it does definitely require some financial stability, which to a certain degree, that's the rich getting richer. But I think of all the things, it's probably one of the easiest to get to. You don't have to start big. Buy something that's inexpensive if that's what your budget is. And then you can get bigger and bigger buildings as you go, but definitely do it in order. The other thing that people said was holding them back is just the hassle factor. Everything I just said about evicting tenants, I don't do that often. And there's ways to minimize the hassle, but there's some hassle, sure, especially if you're self-managing. Now, the easiest way to get rid of that hassle factor is hire a property manager that does it for you. Now, again, that makes it more passive. It does not make it completely passive, because even then you want to be involved with what's going on. Not all property managers would do things the way that you would. And so you just want to keep that line of communication open, and be asking questions all the time of how's it going? Because ultimately you cannot fully give it over to them. It's your asset at the end of the day. It's your financial future. So as much as we want to throw a lot of the hassle factor onto them, I think that's fantastic. It's a good vendor to have and can really play a major role, and they know more than you. I think they earn their money. I'm very pro using a property manager. But I also want to say that doesn't mean don't be involved in your investment. Okay, money. Let's talk about the money. Where in the world do you come up with the money to do all of this stuff? Few different places to do this. One, of course, is get a loan. So it is different for investment property. If you are buying, this is how I understand things right now. For a conventional loan, if you are buying a single family, you can do as low as 20% down. Your rate is better if you do 25%. If you are doing anything more than a 2-family, 2, 3, or 4, then you need 25% down. And you do need some cash reserves. They want to know that you have financial stability, that if the roof starts leaking, that you're able to take care of it. And when they look at your ratios, they take into account 70% of rent. So you don't have to be able to completely cover that mortgage payment out of your own income. Although I think you have to have a year of experience as a landlord before they'll count any of it. So just some things to keep in mind, but obviously you'll go through all of that when you get pre-approved, and they'll be able to tell you, the pre-approval, how that will work. So 20 or 25% down, depending how many units. Once you get over 4, if you are 5 or more, then you're not a residential loan anymore. Then it is commercial. So if it is 5 or 6, even, that doesn't feel like that big of a building, but for banking purposes, it is. So that is the consequence of getting into a commercial loan. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but they do typically require a little bit more down. They do typically require, commercial appraisal, which is a little bit more expensive. And it won't amortize over 30 years. It typically amortizes over 20. There's a lot of things that factor into it. Commercial loans aren't as cut and dried. It's more so the policies of the banks. So you might want to shop it a little bit depending on the size of the project. But anyways, that's one source of funds, the bank. Another source of funds is hard money, which just means private lender. For you making an offer, it looks like cash typically, which is great. That can help you win. I haven't done a lot with hard money, but I did during the downturn. I bought one that was foreclosure and it needed work. So conventional financing wasn't going to be great because banks don't like to lend on things that need a lot of work. Hard money lenders have no problem with it. So I borrowed from a hard money lender and then did the work and then refinanced. So he did still get, he didn't make a ton off of me for interest because I didn't hold that loan for very long, but I did pay him, I want to say it was like $5,000 or something for the privilege of using his money, which was worth it for me because the deal was good enough. And again, that's one of those, everybody does it a little differently. Conventional mortgages, you need to fall in. It's easy to know the rules because it's whatever Fannie and Freddie are saying. Hard money is going to be, depends on the investor that you're working with. Seller financing, buying something on land contract. That can be really similar to the idea of hard money. Like if there's something that needs work, specifically, buy it for what it's worth today. Have them be the ones that are taking your payment for a little bit. Do that work and then refinance. That's a great way to do it. There's actually some advantages to the seller for selling on land contract long term, because if you do have a gain that you're recognizing, you recognize it over the time that you're getting those payments. So there can be some positive tax things for the seller. So that would be the reason for them to do it. Or maybe they'll get a little bit more if it's something that's not financeable because of the condition. That if they'll do it as seller financing, allowing you to make those repairs, maybe they don't have the money to make the repairs. That's often true, but they can keep making their payment for a year while you do the work and then refinance. So seller financing, especially people getting started, that can be a really good way to do it. Because for conventional mortgages, you're limited in the number that you're able to take out. I think the number right now is 10. That went down to 4 during the downturn, which was interesting. Now it's back up to 10. So if you do plan on having a lot of properties, there's some planning to that. Like my husband and I don't own everything jointly so that we can maximize those numbers of mortgages. Another source of funds would be to partner up. Of all the things that I'm talking about today, this would be the one that I would say to use the most caution about. I did a flip once with a partner, and I'll just say I wouldn't do it again, not without a lot of consideration. It sounded like, to me, it felt like a really good situation. It was a guy that I knew that was a builder, and maybe my red flag should have been I met him because I was doing a short sale on his house. And so he was getting cash for keys. So he had this lump of cash from the bank. And we knew of this house that was in a really good neighborhood that needed some work. And he was a builder. And I was like, hey, why don't you live there? Use your cash for keys money. I have good credit, so I can get the loan, and I put in some of my own money. And then when it's done, we'll sell it and we'll split the proceeds. Seemed like a really good plan. What we didn't define is milestones that he needed to be reaching. Blah, blah, blah. 2 years later, the house still wasn't done. And the bank didn't like that. It was a construction loan, and they wanted it to wrap up. So I ended up having to evict him so that I could just get somebody in there who would just finish it up. And it was a hot mess. So blah, blah, be smarter than me when you're dealing with partners. Make sure that it's very, very well spelled out, because it caused hard feelings for both of us. So partners can be a great thing, but make sure that you're both putting in equally, and that things are just very, very, very well spelled out. Do attorney type documents while you're still all getting along. That would be my words of wisdom there. And then home equity line of credit. That can be a really, if you have equity in your house, now, of course, the cautionary tale would be now your house is at risk based on how this rental does, right? Like that would be a thing that you'd have to consider when you're thinking about how to do this. But it can be a really good source to give you that financial stability that you're looking for to go ahead and move forward. If you borrow a little off your house, use that for your down payment, use that for repairs. And when you have that available to pull on, if you do need to put in a furnace or a new roof or new windows or what have you, there's some cash available to do that with. So again, I'm very conservative with using my home equity line of credit, but I do use it. It's been a good tool for me to be able to finish out that down payment or to, do those capital repairs. And then I pay that sucker off as quickly as I can. But it's a nice tool to have there. Okay. So Now you need to figure out, let's say I've convinced you, hopefully a little bit I've convinced you or scared you off. I'm trying to give both sides of things. But when you're thinking, yeah, okay, I'm ready, let's do this. Then we got to think about, what are your goals? Are you trying to maximize your cash flow because you want it to be part of your lifestyle? You want it to be part of your monthly income? Then you're going to be looking probably at a different kind of property than if you were more focused on the appreciation. And as maybe like a sub goal is, I don't know if goal is the right word, but another consideration besides just your goals is the time that you're willing to give. Because there's no property that takes zero time. Hopefully I've been clear about that. But what you can do is minimize your time by having good tenants. The hassle factor on lower income properties tends to be higher, but your return is also higher as well. Now there's ways to mitigate that. Like if you do buy something that's in a lower income area, Section 8 is really, really awesome. Some people are afraid of Section 8. If you don't know what that is, that's where the government helps them pay rent. It's a great program. You know you're getting at least that government part of your rent. That's one thing, of course, that's pretty darn awesome. The other thing is there's a pretty long waiting list for it. So it would be pretty devastating for that tenant to lose their subsidy. They lose it when they get evicted. So, and they get drug tested, and you have a caseworker. There's a lot of really, really positive things for participating in Section 8, and that can kind of, then you'll have hopefully a longer term tenant, which will reduce the hassle factor. Because really the things that are the most like hassling, in my opinion, is when you have turnover. Then all of a sudden, you got to get the thing painted, and you change the locks, and you're showing it to new tenants, and you're filling out the new lease, and all those things that happen at turnover tend to be the most hassling. So the more that you can get them to stay, that reduces your hassles. And of course, eviction is a hassle. I would put that in the hassle category. So if you can get in situations where they're going to stay a little bit longer and they're financially stable in one way or the other, either through government subsidies or just they have good jobs, so that kind of factors into the what are your goals. Because again, if your goal is cash flow, then maybe you don't mind a little bit of hassle factor because it'll increase your return. Great, who cares? Go after it. Again, it just kind of depends on what all is going on in your life. And like for me, I don't need it as part of my lifestyle. What I'm trying to do is build wealth for the future. Now that might change. My oldest son is about ready to go to college, and I've always been thinking of this as part of my college savings plan. So, maybe my priorities will change. But for right now, appreciation is the biggest deal to me. And I do want it to cash flow. I like to break even. I don't like to put in. But even if I have to put in a little, that's okay. That's in line with my goals. So I'm going to be looking at a different kind of property. And I told you my sub goal is I'm hoping to sell them a house. I'm hoping to contribute towards somebody becoming a homeowner. And that is more likely to happen. Like I said, lately I've been more so focusing in on either single family homes or duplexes that are a little bit more expensive. But I'm also counteracting that with, I do have a couple duplexes that are in a little bit lower income areas. So that offsets. I have different goals for different properties. So it doesn't mean if my goal is appreciation, that's going to be my goal for everything. I kind of look at each one. So some of them, my goal is to give me more cash flow so that if someday I need a roof, then that's fine. And like I said, like if you have a single family home and you have a vacancy, then you have zero cash coming in. Well, if you have a handful of properties, then that's not as true. It reduces your exposure. So I try to balance balance my portfolio a little bit between the goals, but that's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so now you've purchased something. You figured out, here's the kind of property that I want to go after, and you've purchased it. You figured out your money, you got pre-approved by your lender, and now you're trying to figure out, what kind of repairs do I need to make? And which ones are the most worthwhile? And I guess some of this happens before the sale, right? Like, we're going through and we're trying to evaluate, is this a good property for me to purchase? Okay. I have a friend who, maybe I can drag him onto a call someday. But I was kind of picking his brain a little bit. I was like, what advice would you give to new investors? And here's what he said as far as evaluating repairs. One is, if there are major foundation issues, get out of there. That's a can of worms. Now, I have had an investor who bought something super cheap because it had vertical cracks in the foundation, and it was from the garage pushing onto the wall. And he worked for a concrete company, so he was able to remove the garage, remove the thing that was causing the wall to buckle, make that repair. He picked it up as a song because it had foundation repairs. If that's not your area of expertise, then I would say, if there are foundation issues, that's a non-starter. Then you're going to look at your majors, and we all know this as just being realtors, but how's the roof? How's the furnace? And windows? Those are kind of your big ticket items that you want to kind of take into effect. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is lead paint can really add up if you're buying something that's old and kind of flaky. If you are going to hire out that paint job, there's a lot of things that the painters need to do that increase the cost. Get a quote on that. So that wasn't on my friend's list, but I'm just going to put that as a little asterisk, that can really increase your costs. But you always have to do these lead disclosures, like you want to get it taken care of, but that can really increase your cost as far as like these older buildings. He says, always update kitchens and bathrooms. And we know that to be true, right? It's true in the rental world too. People buy based on the kitchens and baths. If the kitchens and baths are nice, they don't care as much about the bedroom. That's where they spend time. That's where you get your wow factor. So put in a tile backsplash, for crying out loud. It's just not that expensive. I go through so many rentals that have like the stick-on tiles, and that just makes everything feel yucky. Don't skip there. Make it a nice place. It's just not that expensive, and you'll get a return because you'll get a better tenant who appreciates those kinds of things and likes that you appreciate it. He does a lot of flipping, and what he says is look for a wall that will help you to make it an open concept. That is one thing that you can do that will really increase the value, because you've just changed the floor plan to something that's a lot more attractive. I don't know if I would necessarily do that for renters. Now, with renters, your goal is a little different. You're not necessarily removing walls. What we want to do is maximize the number of bedrooms, typically. A lot of times things rent per bedroom. So if there's a way that you can take advantage of that wall to make it another bedroom, this is if you're holding it. So if you're flipping it, you're removing walls. If you're holding it, you're adding bedrooms. Make the curb appeal really nice. Of course, this is the tenants and owners alike want to feel pride in where they live. At least the good tenants, the ones that you want. So make it look nice for that when they drive up, that they're already feeling that pride of, I would love to live there. And paint everything something neutral. And if you have several rentals, have a color that you always use, and that's your general neutral. Somebody moves out, you have a 5-gallon bucket of it in your back room, and you just go paint it, and it's the same every time. And you can tell them it's whatever, Sherwin-Williams, blah, blah, blah color. So that if your tenant painted a wall purple and you're requiring them to put it back before they move out, they know exactly what color to do. That's another good repair to have done when you start. Then we're thinking about making repairs. Do what you can, but don't overdo that. It's really good. The more rentals you have, the more that you want to create a relationship with a handyman for sure. Like, it's so great to have somebody that you can call and say, hey, I just had to move out. Can you change the locks for me? You definitely need a person like that. That's where a property manager is nice, because, you know, they have those connections. They just say, oh, and property managers know all the least expensive people. I don't know how they do it. They're on the hunt, I guess. But you need a new roof, they know who to call to get it done fast and inexpensive. They typically have those kinds of connections. So if you're self-managing, you're going to want to make sure that you're getting those connections too. Now I'm starting to run out of time. I want to leave some time for questions, but I also want to talk a little bit about management, because I know that this can be a source of stress for people. They say, you know, I like the idea. I kind of get the, you know, what repairs and stuff to make, because I'm a realtor, but what about management? How do I handle that? So here's some things that I want to talk about. One is, I recently started using apartments.com, and that is a fantastic tool, not just for advertising it for rent, that it does that too, but also you can use that to keep track of when rent is due, how much is due, the tenants can pay through there. It just is a really good, just like management tool. This is fairly recent. They bought out, I forget the name of it. But there was a property management software that they bought out because they wanted to be that, like, this is where landlords spend their time, is on apartments.com. And so they have some really good free tools for that. So there's my little tip of the day. Go look at apartments.com. Here's my other tips. So I tend to put it on Facebook Marketplace. Maybe it depends on the kind of property. Be ready. I get overloaded with inquiries. So I usually, their default is this available? And then the default response is yes. Or I usually just say something simple. Like, if they're going to do the default inquiry, I'm going to do the default response. And then if they start asking more questions, then I know they're serious. So that's kind of my first level of sorting. And then what I do, and again, it depends on the type of property and how popular it is, but I tend to just say, hey, I'm going to be there Saturday from 2 to 3, or maybe not even that long, because people tend to come at the beginning of the time frame. I'm going to be there Saturday 2 to 2:30. Because people tend to not show up. Honestly, I don't know why. I think it's kind of rude, but it just is life, that a lot of people that say they're going to be there don't show up. So if I can do it open house style, then that saves me a lot of time. And then what I do is I have them apply online. I do want somebody who has a little bit of tech savviness, or at least I like them to pay me electronically. So I take payments via either Venmo or Zelle or apartments.com. I do accept checks too, but I don't prefer it. I prefer for them to pay me in electronic manner. So if that's my preference, then I want the kind of person who knows how to at least use their phone. So I make them apply through apartments.com. What's pretty awesome about apartments.com is that they can apply for that same fee. I forget how much it is. I want to say $29 that it costs them to apply on apartments.com, but then they can use that same information and apply to 10 different places. I mentioned that, and it's important because the city of Grand Rapids, if your property is in the city of Grand Rapids, they have a rule that if you don't rent to this person, you have to refund their application fee. Some people were starting to abuse the application fee thing and just take as many applications as they could, even knowing that somebody didn't really even qualify. So they tried to put a stop to it by saying, you know, you have to refund it back. Well, what stinks about that is I have some hard costs associated. So what I do is, and there's some verbiage, I can give you one of my sheets if anybody's interested. There's some verbiage that the city requires, basically letting the tenant know their rights. Be really clear about, because you don't have to refund it if you turn them down if they don't qualify, if you told them what your qualification standards are up front. So, okay, yeah, I'll get you the sheet. I'm going to put it up on, a lot of you are in my Training with Clarity Facebook group. I'll follow up after with a link to that. And I'm going to put that sheet that has that Grand Rapids wording. I'll put that on in the Training with Clarity Facebook page. But you have to let them know what your requirements are. So like, for example, I require the 3 times rent is income. I require no felonies, no pets. I require that children have their own bedroom, only 2 children per bedroom, and they have to be the same gender. So if you have a boy and a girl, and then the parents or parent, you need to have 3 bedrooms, for example. So I just tell them, here's my policies. And then I'm being fair. They know what they are before they apply. So they know if they don't qualify to not bother. And then if I've told them and then they don't qualify, I'm not required to give that back. And then I take them in order. I don't consider it off market until somebody's giving me a whole deposit. I require $500. And then as soon as I've accepted that, I'm turning applications off. The key is to be really fair to everybody. You want to be really careful about fair housing, of course. I think everybody knows that. If somebody qualifies and you're taking them in order, then you're going to be okay from that standpoint. But obviously, you cannot say you want somebody who's married or not married. You want familial status. You can have policies about how many kids per bedroom, but you can't say because you have kids, you can't live here. Not if it's a 2-bedroom house and they have 1 kid or 2 kids, that you can't just discriminate against somebody based on familial status. I think we're all licensed. We took fair housing laws. So you just want to be careful that you're treating everybody fairly. The other thing that can get you into trouble is pets. I say no pets, but if somebody asks me, hey, I have an emotional support animal. I mean, there's websites where you can screen if it's like a legit support animal. But you can't say no to them. If it's a service animal of any kind, there's different levels of animals, but I know not everybody does. Like people will say, I say, of course I will. That's the law, I'm required to. And they say, oh, well, this guy told me that he wouldn't. Don't be that guy. You got to follow the law. So anyway, I know I'm getting at my time, and this is this is an area that I'm very, very passionate about. So I could go on and on all day, and I'm not going to, but hopefully I've given you enough that you know where to get the money from, you know, kind of the beginning of how to manage it. And hopefully you just know, sell this to your clients, man. They should all be real estate investors too. And let's make our tenants homeowners. There's so many ways that we should be selling real estate because it is the greatest investment of all times. So anyways, so that's all I have for today. If anybody has any questions, I know it's 11 o'clock. If you need to go, by all means, we took screenshots as we went as far as who's here, so we can make sure you get your Con Ed credit. But if you have any questions or anything that you want to add, I am here. I'm actually going to stop sharing so I can see your faces. Hi, Mike. Good morning.
Willie, do you have an LLC? Or what do you do your investing under?
Okay, that's a really good question because there's pros and cons to that. I do not. The reason I don't have an LLC is because if you want to do an eviction and you're in an LLC, you have to hire an attorney to do that eviction for you. If you own it individually, then you can go to court for yourself. And so, just attorney fees. The other thing I didn't say is join our POA. This is a side note. The Rental Property Owners Association has a lot of really, really good resources. They have all the forms. They tell you how to do evictions. Like they're so knowledgeable and awesome. Love, 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 love them. But the reason you go into an LLC is for liability protection, right? And we're all worried about that with tenants, especially, right? Like they perceive us as having more money than them, and they're probably right. So if they can sue us, sometimes they have the desire to do that. So what I do to mitigate that, if not being in an LLC, is I have an umbrella insurance policy that's really high. And that does the same thing.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question. I was thinking about investing into just vacant land, trying to pick it up inexpensively and hold on to it until I'm able to sell it for a higher profit.
Sure.
To get cash flow in order to go into more of the what we were talking about here in the whole hour of buying homes and stuff. I just thought I'd ask what your opinion is of that.
So I'm always in favor of trying to put my ear to the wind of what are areas that are going to go up. And I think vacant land kind of falls into that. If you maybe know of, they're going to run water down this road, or, things of that nature where they're going to go up in value, maybe quicker than other areas. That to me, the downside of vacant land is you don't have a lot of income potential. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you can use it as a storage space for RVs over the winter, that kind of thing. Maybe there's some, but what's great about, residential is you're getting rent as you hold it versus vacant land. You're going to be paying property taxes and everything else, but they're not making more of it. And we desperately need to build. We have a housing shortage crisis. So I think of any time in history to be buying vacant land, now's the time. And especially if you can do some improvements to it. Every weekend go and clear some trees or whatever. I don't know. Does that answer your question? Maybe not, but that's my 2 cents.
Oh, I think you helped me very much with that. I appreciate it. I see how you're thinking much more on some type of income, where I was thinking you hold on to it for a while and use it as, I was thinking larger acreages. So it was something that would be more fun for me to use and market it during that time, and only sell it when you're able to sell it for a higher profit, and kind of maybe buy bigger properties as I go, or then when I have more cash flow, get into the the housing and the rentals, because you're able to pick up sometimes vacant land with seller financing
Sure.
pretty inexpensively, and that's kind of why I was thinking that route.
Hey, Mike, can I pick on you to weigh in on what do you think about vacant land? I know you have a little bit of background on that.
Wow, called on the spot.
I know. He's not going to tell me anything anymore.
No, I'm good. I think your comment on an income stream is a good one. So it comes down to what people's goals are. And I would say you need to be incredibly cautious on the environmental side of things, because people buy properties that they don't think are wetland, or they don't know about coastal regulations, and they think it's a beautiful piece of property, and then they're caught up. So there's more to vacant land than just the land. I think you have to go into it eyes wide open. There are people that can support you with that, but that's where I've seen a lot of investors without background get caught. They contract and buy property without having that background. So I would just write an offer on any of those properties contingent on getting the types of reviews you need. That's my 2 cents.
Awesome. Thanks much.
You bet.
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question. Does anybody else have anything? Those are really, really good questions.
Great meeting. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate everybody that came. And if you do have, oh, repeat the name of the rental property. Yeah, it's the RPOA, the Rental Property Owners Association in Grand Rapids. Their website is rpoaonline.org. That is, if you're gonna self-manage especially, to me, that is just like a requirement. I would never self-manage without their support. They do a really, really awesome job. And they do a lot of like landlord advocacy at a government level, which is, I think, greatly needed. Because I've seen areas like Muskegon doesn't have that same kind of support. And I think you can tell it in the laws a bit. It's not quite as landlord friendly as Grand Rapids is. Okay, well, good. Well, I appreciate all of you. I hope that someday that we can do this in person, but on the other hand, webinars are pretty awesome because people like Mike out on the lakeshore maybe wouldn't have come all the way into Grand Rapids. So I appreciate seeing your face here today. And
Thank you. Goodbye.
all right, we'll see you next time.